stand to my feet now because Queen, do I need to stand up now? And there you go.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you all doing?
Wonderful. How are you?
I am well. No complaints here.
Well, and I'm doing pretty good for a young man.
Excellent, excellent. We're excited to do another episode here of Chatting with the Clays. We're certainly excited about the service and the wonderful, inspiring message today. And we are also embarking upon a very, very monumental Sunday. Next Sunday, we will be celebrating your, is that 25th? 25th?
25th.
Ooh, 25th pastor and wife anniversary. So I'm certainly excited to be here. This is the prequel. You know, it's not the sequel. It's the prequel. This is the prequel to that service. So, the prequel. Yeah. Yeah, right. So I wanted to spend some time today just in conversation as we do. And you know what? Y'all gonna have to turn those water bottles around because we might get sponsored one day. You know, I don't want those two companies to get free advertisement on
There
you go.
Now leave them up there. I want to tempt folks. They know what the shapes are. I want to tempt them.
Okay.
Oh, just turn them around.
Back. Just put the labels backwards. We won't pray and touch and agree on sponsorship. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Okay, that was just bothering my spirit. But what we're talking about today is something that I think the two of you all can discuss at a level that is really, really unique. And again, with your special anniversary service, and I certainly hope folks are tuning in and marking their calendars. It's going to be very, very special next Sunday with your 25th pastor and wife anniversary. I want to walk through just a couple things that I believe are going to be really interesting, entertaining, but of course, above all, really going to bless the people. So if I were to throw a theme out today, the theme today would be getting your bearings, right? Getting your bearings. Now, This is interesting because when we talk about getting our bearings, oftentimes that colloquialism points to us getting situated and acclimated and accustomed to our environment. Your collar's up there. Your right collar is hanging out of your lapel there. There you go, sir.
Thank you. Kind,
so you do it for me, so I thought I'd return it.
You're so kind.
Getting your bearings, you know, we'll talk about, you know, being lost or maybe in a new area and trying to get accustomed to where we are, get our directions down, our landmarks, all those things. But also, and you know, I don't mind consulting definitions and revisiting and deepening my perspective on words. But if we think about bearings, I'm going to also read a little bit of the definition: the manner in which one conducts or carries oneself. The manner in which one conducts or carries oneself, including posture and gestures. Now, the other thing, and I really want to turn into this particular point, bearing by definition can also be something that is produced, such as a crop. That's a bearing, okay? And if we're going for extra credit, I'll just throw this one out there, but you know, we might not get a chance to dance on this like we want to today. Bearing can also be the act of enduring or the capacity to endure. Now, where are we going here? Preacher, where are we going with all this? All of this, I want to point to you all 25 years. Y'all know who y'all talking to, so I'm going to have fun with this. But I want to point to your 25 years pastoring, over 40 years in ministry, and thinking about bearings, which is how you've conducted yourself, your capacity for producing, bringing forth what has been produced, and then your act of enduring. Now, I'll walk you through this, so don't even worry about recapping all that. But this is essentially where I want to go. So I was thinking about David. 1 Samuel 17 chapter talks about David. David's having a conversation with Saul. he's, Goliath is breathing down threats, and David rolls up with lunch for his brothers, and he hears this, and it catches his attention, and he immediately goes into action. First, it catches his attention, then he's looking around and he's asking folks like, man, y'all just gonna let this guy curse our God, this uncircumcised Philistine? And David, as the whole situation escalates and David's ready to go out there, he says to Saul, essentially, look, I fought lions, bears that came to attack my sheep, and I'm not really worried about this uncircumcised Philistine. He'll be just like one of them, the lion or the bear that I've killed. Mm-hmm. Your bearings. We also know that Zechariah 4:10 urges us to not despise the day of small beginnings. So when I think about bearings, I think about David, how David prepared with the bear, right? Mm-hmm. Prepared with the bear, not knowing that God was necessarily going to take him all the way through the journey. Some things have been revealed to David, but the entirety of his journey wasn't. So let's start with this simple question. Before you knew you would be pastoring, name and briefly describe for us one situation that maybe now you can look back on that was a foreshadow for what came later in terms of you all pastoring. So again, think about when you weren't pastoring. What's a situation that you look back upon that was a bit of a foreshadow to you that you would be pastoring later? Clearly, you wouldn't have known it then. But again, just like David, he had to deal with that bear. He had to get his bearings, right? And I'm playing with that word, that phrase, that term. What was a moment or a situation, now that you all reflect on 25 years of pastoring, what was a moment before pastoring that foreshadowed to you that pastoring was coming, even if you didn't know it then?
I recall, I think it was 1960, it's about 1966. My art teacher, Mr. Shepherd, I'll say real quick, I tore the art class, meaning when I tore it up, meaning I was very distractful in the art class. And he was so frustrated with me. I can see his face right now. And he pulled me aside. He pulled me aside. He was a African-American art teacher. And he pulled me aside. We were making, what's that stuff, the dough, clay, and you're supposed to make, and he had like, I think it was a horse or something in the middle of the table. And we were supposed to mold this horse by what we see. And I
so Clay was making clay?
Huh?
Clay was making clay?
Clay was making clay.
That'll preach.
And I can't remember, but I did some crazy stuff with it. And he was so upset with me. He pulled me aside. Oh my goodness. He pulled me aside and said, you have the ability to lead a lot of people. And people listen to you. He said, these kids listen to you and they follow you. He said, stop acting up, because if you don't change the way you're doing things, you really can, he used the word, in other words, you are messing up the ability that you have. Mm. This was back in I think it's 66 or 67. Wow. My art teacher, I'll never forget that.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yeah.
So let me get this right. the shepherd was talking to the clay who was making clay and foreshadow. Okay, I ain't even gonna mess with that. That's powerful. That's powerful.
Yes.
Mom, jump in.
Come here, Chris, first.
What was the
Did I
moment?
tell you about that story? That
Yeah.
was Floyd.
Look, he's doing it
Oh,
right
I'm
now.
sorry.
Right now.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
To do something good. No.
Go ahead.
No, that's good, man. I'm just teasing with you. Mom, you do the same. Think about a time prior to pastoring that foreshadowed to you, now that you look back on it, that pastoring was in the future for you.
For me, it was in my teens, and I may have been around 15, 16, somewhere in there. And about that time, all of the young people that we came up together in the church, out of the older group, I was younger, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them had begun to, they were all in their 18s, 19s now, and, began to launch out and had quit coming to church by that time. And I was probably about 15 or 16. And so I was the younger of that group, but I was the older of the group that was under me. And by this time, our minister of music had gone on. He graduated from high school and moved out to California. And he was our musician, of course, the pastor's son, my first cousin. And his sister and I'm a year older than she, and she began to learn how to play the organ because we didn't, he played the guitar, but he also played the organ. And their mother, my aunt, she played the piano, but she wasn't the church pianist. So she kind of picked up the slack until we had a musician. Now, our pastor, mind you, he played the guitar and he would play, during service and play and preach for us and accompany himself while he's praying. But as for the choir, the younger group now, so we didn't really have any musicians. And I became the choir president. And I was 16 because at 17, I got my car. And I had the little red Ford Pinto, and I would pick up.
Excuse me. A lot of people don't know
what a Ford Pinto is. Look that up.
It
was 1977 Ford Pinto. Two-door Ford Pinto. And the hatchback. And I would pick up the young people for choir rehearsal, but the young people would, they would just kind of gravitate toward me and talk to me, and and I, along the way, encouraged them. Didn't really realize at that time what I was doing. I didn't really realize the position in their eyes that I was playing. And so, fast forward, and now that I'm an adult, and the young people would say, they'd tell me when we come back home, we looked up to you, and all that. So I think that's for me is the first, especially real leadership, if you will, and knowing that, and I knew I had to, be a positive example for them, in the church. So knowing that they were looking at me, they would confide in me. We had other young people that didn't belong to our church, but they were in our district. They went to other churches that we fellowshiped with, and they would confide in me, and call me and things like that. So I think probably in looking back now, I would say that's my first real peek into, pastoring, real leadership, leading people.
Absolutely.
And my art teacher's name was Floyd Shepherd. Mr. Floyd. Yeah.
Floyd Shepherd.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Floyd Shepherd. That's awesome. That's awesome. So then my second question, because again, if we're thinking about some of the parallels in the conversation of some of your early days, getting your bearings in the context of David and his story. David came to a crossroads. He came to a point where his mission was to bring lunch to his brothers, but his calling caused him to abort his mission. And well, he thought he was aborting his mission, excuse me, but the Lord clearly had a different plan for him. However, that plan for David was activated at the crossroads of decision. David heard Goliath breathing out his threats, breathing out his slurs, breathing out his attacks. And he could have just said, well, I'm here to bring lunch. Or he could have said, this bothers me, but maybe I don't feel adequate or prepared enough for this moment. I didn't come here for all of that. You know, I'll let the soldiers do the fighting, and I'll go back to shepherding. There was a crossroads, and we see this story kind of playing out in our minds, but back in David's shoes, we don't see the moments of thought and deliberation. We don't know if it was a course of hours. We don't know if he was there half a day. We don't know if it was minutes, but one way or another, we know at some point David came to a crossroads. And especially now, and especially for, I would say, my generation and younger generations, but I think for all people, we have the pressure to try to end our chapters so quickly. And you all have heard me say this before, because of social media, everybody wants to jump out there and say, this is why I went through this and this is the end. God has clearly prepared me because of this. On a daily and weekly basis, we are trying to end chapters in our life and make sense of it in front of the world. But we know the process isn't as quick as social media will turn it around. It's not about a photo. It's not about a post. It's not about just a quick conclusion. Sometimes that process takes years, and especially for leadership, you know, we might get these glimpses and these signals, and maybe the two of you all, even in those moments in dad's art class and mom being the choir president, maybe in those two different moments, something made you think about leadership, but it still took years, several decades, for you all to be called and qualified and justified, right? So I bring this question to you. Can you name and recount for us briefly a crossroads where you needed to make a decision? And again, maybe you didn't know it at the time, but now that you're looking back on it, 25 years of pastoring, 40 years in ministry, looking back at this crossroads, you know that a decision you made led you down the path leading to where you are today. So at any point, you could have been young, you could have been less young, you could have been lesser young. You see how I'm doing? Yeah, I ain't getting in trouble today. You could be young, you could be less young, you could be lesser young. But what was a moment that comes to mind just right away that was a crossroads moment?
Crossroad moment. Oh boy, I don't.
Well, Dad, maybe you need to go first. Maybe it's at the top of your head. Dad be you know, I'm moderating here. Come on, Dad.
Yes, sir. The crossroad.
And it could have been several. Just pick one.
That's what I was thinking about. My mind goes back, and I think that the crossroad experience would have been me on Interstate 80, my favorite interstate, headed west. And it was a beautiful, sunny day, blue skies, but just like if God just painted the picture that day, just for me.
Yes, sir.
And there was I was forced to make a decision, but God now, I knew had his hand in it. Not to go into any deep detail.
Yes, sir.
But I was rejected. And it caused me to make a change in my life. And
He said briefly.
Yes. And so anyway,
Uh-huh.
I asked the Lord, because I had heard that your mother took me to church on a Sunday. I never, first time in my life being in the Church of God in Christ. And they scared me half to death. They were shouting and running and they were boisterous. And I wasn't used to that. And I was trying to get out of the church, but like, I know God had arrested me because I couldn't move. Nervous as I don't know what. Actually, I was just terrified. So make a long story short, that experience, when I was on the road, I asked God, I said, Lord, if you are real, show me a sign. Now this is, I'm not saved, but that introduction into holiness and being in that atmosphere stuck with me. And I said, Lord, if you're real, show me a sign. And when I looked up, I'm driving 1976 Money Green LTD, fully equipped LTD Brougham, biggest you could have got in that day. I looked up and I saw a 5-pointed star, and it was flickering on the backdrop of that blue sky. When I asked God, if you're real, show me a sign. I've never, until this day, when it's a perfectly blue sky, ever saw a star.
That's
I've never. Listen, wow, hallelujah, praise Jesus. Thank you, God. If God never shows himself to me at all, that's one time. Now, I know I had alcohol in the car, might have had some drugs, but no. That was God. It scared me.
Sobered you.
No, I wasn't high. I'm trying to listen. It scared me so. I took my hands off of the steering wheel of my car. I'll never forget it. And I started thanking God. I was putting my hands together. I was saying, thank you. And then this is me. When I came to my senses, I grabbed my steering wheel again and started, because it was like, I scared, that right there. Oh my God, hallelujah. I'll never forget that.
Absolutely.
Never in my life forget that.
That's powerful. And I mean, of all the things that can be said to that, we know that the way God speaks and uses numbers, 5 is the number of grace. Especially when we study his word, we see 5 being that number of grace. So that 5-point star, that grace that's shown upon you. And I really also appreciate you holding to that, because some of us, the Lord has shown us signs and we need one every 6, 7, 9 months, but that's a whole nother thing. That's powerful, Dad. Excellent. Mom.
Can I add one more thing?
Go ahead, please.
The cap that you're wearing does not have 5 stars on it.
It does. It does. It has 5 stars, which each have 5 points. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I told you, one day we're going to get into this. We are. Yes, sir. Absolutely. But that's powerful. We're going to get right into that. Yes, sir. Mom, same thing. What was a crossroads moment? We know how David kind of walked into his crossroads moment, even if we don't know exactly how he felt and the things that went through his mind and how it all transpired. But what was a crossroads moment for you that you recognized led you down to that path of ministry and pastoralship?
I think, again, after you gave me a little time to think about it, because I've had so many pointed moments in my life, but probably for ministry was the last home that we purchased in Des Moines before we moved to Waterloo and started pastoring. And your dad was working the 11 to 7 shift at the tire company. And he had just left to go to work, and I wasn't asleep. And I was just laying there talking to God, you know, in the bed. And the Lord spoke to me in an audible voice. And he said, "This is a pastor's house." And I looked around the room because the voice was audible. I looked around the room and I thought, nobody's in here, you know. And I got up and I thought, now, I know my husband went to work and the kids was in bed asleep, but it wasn't a kid voice.
He wasn't asleep.
It wasn't a kid voice.
He was reading that book.
He was reading the book. And and I got back in the bed and I started talking to God again, and I'm like, what do you mean? And I started telling the Lord, you know, no, this can't be. And book, you know, I just went on, and the Lord began to just minister to me what he was saying. And so the crossroad about that was, I held it for a while. I never shared it. And I said, I knew whenever I spoke it, it was going to come to pass. And how I knew that, I don't know. But I knew that whenever I spoke it, it was going to come to pass. So I held it and prayed about it, and I mused over it, and, you know, everything. And I don't know how long from the time the Lord spoke that to me until the time I shared it with Pastor. I don't know what that time frame was, but when I said that to him, I don't think it was maybe a complete week. And our pastor came to him and said, I need you to go help assist one of the churches in our district. And that was Pastor White's church. And from that day, I think we did that for a year or so. We helped that church out. And then after that, he sent him to another one of the churches in the district in Marshalltown. And after that, we were sent here temporarily. And it's been 25 years.
Yeah, that's powerful. It's powerful. So let's continue to walk down this journey, but I'm enjoying this. So, you know, if we progress through the moments that David was in the camp, and the Philistines stood in opposition, and the breathing of the threats and all of that. And, you know, we last left off with question 2, talking about a crossroads moment. And that's when David stepped forth to offer himself as the warrior who would fight Goliath. And we know that was high stakes, you know, because it was, you know, winner take all. You know, if the soldier won, then that army won. If the soldier lost, that army lost. So that was high stakes. But what also became a point that is inspiring and memorable is Saul offered David armor to fight Goliath. And we know the story about David essentially saying, this armor for me isn't proven. And again, we could take off and we could preach that thing real heavy. Can you all each take a moment yet again where you recognize that the course of action you were taking to do things didn't necessarily fit? Or another way to look at it, when God showed you or co-signed and affirmed to you that there's a unique way that he would give you to pastor and to minister and serve his people. So again, recapping the question, just to give you more time to think about it. David went off with his sling and his stones, which had been proven for him to defend his sheep. And the armor wasn't proven for him. And I want you each to tell us and share a reflection of a moment where essentially you felt like God co-signed the uniqueness of your ministry and your pastorship. And that could have been a turning point of maybe you started to approach things in a particular way, and you reached that moment where you recognize that, no, God has given something to me, and it might be proven for just me, and it may not be, you know, the tactics and the strategies and the approach that others take. So can you give one particular example each? I still got 2 questions to get to, but I really want to hear this.
Yeah. Well, for me, like I said, after things started going, after that, you know, after the Lord spoke that this was a pastor's house and everything, I began to pray and fast because, like I said, in a couple previous chatting with the Clays about pastoring, that was one thing I never wanted. Because of the experiences I had seen, you know, as a girl growing up in church, being the pastor's niece. And so I had baggage, so to speak, that wasn't necessarily good baggage. And I began to pray and ask the Lord to mold me and make me and shape me, you know, into the pastor's wife that he would want me to be, because, you know, what I had seen with my eyes and what I had, you know, preconceived in my mind wouldn't have been, I know wouldn't have been good. And I always said, you know, if he's pastors, I'm leaving. I'm not in it at all. And so I did. I honestly began to pray and fast and ask the Lord to make me and show me, you know, and help me. And the thing that sealed that even, I had a pastor's wife tell me after we after we were called to pastor. And I said, I'm going to need a whole lot of help, you know, and I'm going to call on you. And that pastor's wife said, you don't need me. And I thought, wow, what, you know, you're a pastor's wife, what a thing to tell a young pastor's wife. But I knew then the Lord wanted to make me, you know, that just co-signed. The Lord wanted to make me. And so that was my prolific moment there.
Wow.
Excellent. Excellent. That's powerful. That's,
you know,
that's powerful.
oh, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
I had to wait for you to give me the.
There's a lot of things that you can do to dive in and prepare, and no one would argue against seeking wisdom and good counsel, and especially someone, you know, who knew what they were doing and had veteran experience. But yeah, that's a perfect fit, pun intended, because that armor of somebody that had proven certain tools and skills and strategies wasn't your armor, and God had an armor that he wanted you to depend on him for, as opposed to taking on someone else's. But that was with good intention, and certainly I know the Lord didn't balk at you trying to be prepared and careful, prudent. So that's powerful. Good answer. Dad, please.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to interrupt you earlier, but your mother's testimony just now, a reflection on the truth that happened in her life. Mine was similar, and I don't even think we even shared it.
Wow.
And I just hear the spirits to let me know that even right today, true ministry is God forms it to fit each individual. People literally like to copy other people. And there's nothing wrong with being inspired by other people.
Yeah.
You know, all of us have been inspired by somebody.
Yeah. That's a good way to,
especially if you've never been this way before. But let me go this way. I had taken a course, or the course in C.H. Mason Bible Seminary. And my course that I was taking was evangelism. And my teacher, I think, yeah, God has called him home. Can't remember his name, you know. Well, but anyway, he was my teacher, and we had it on Saturday. It was held, class was on Saturdays. In the class, they had all the different preachers, ministers, well, all of us get up and do just a presentation of our ministry. Given, sounds awkward, give a presentation of your ministry. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that I was surrounded by some awesome preachers, highly anointed. And oh my goodness, it's like, oh, I like to be like this, like to be like, I would like, you know, my mind, like my eyes were like, oh my goodness. I was just like, had my mouth open. And so in the class, I went to do a presentation, my presentation. And he said, listen, and then he, after I was done, he said, you know, that was okay, but you have a lot of excitement about you, but you don't have any word. And I don't know, I didn't know how to take it. I was kind of offended because I thought I did pretty good, but then the other side is like, man, I don't have anything. What a humbling experience. He said, I had the excitement, but I had no word. After that, I went back home and I asked God, I said, Lord, I want you to teach me how to preach like you did the old pioneers. Let me say one more thing. Earlier than that, earlier after the class, I went, my pastor was at church and you know, he was there and I went into his office and I said, sit down in the chair. I said, Pastor, I need you to do me a favor. He said, what, Brother Clay? I said, will you teach me how to preach? And he knew my pastor. Remember that big smile he had on his face? And he had a laugh that was contagious. He laughed. And do you not know? He never answered me. He never answered me. And he never mentioned anything about it. I never got a reply from him. And then later on, that's when I asked God to teach me like he did the old pioneers.
Yeah. No, that's a excellent, and I don't want to say excellent in the scope of rating.
So that's why I'm sorry. That's why I was saying ours is similar. Yeah. You know.
No, that's powerful, and especially as you talked about, you know, not only the feedback, because excitement is good, and we certainly, I think it's impossible to serve so dynamic and creative and so powerful and not be excited about the things that he can do that we've never even imagined and couldn't think of. I think it's impossible not to be excited, but that's only one part of salvation, you know.
Right.
And I think, you know, especially as a leader, you know, you can see, especially in this day and age, you know, there is a awful lot, and it's not necessarily new, it's been here forever, but there is a lot of excitement. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm and a million ways to be able to express that. But it is the word of God that saves us. And it is the word of God that gives us the substance. It is that blessed hope that we find in the word. And without it, you know, we do just have excitement. And that's only one part of the picture. And that, I think that really resonates powerfully in the day that we're in, you know, because people, they covet the excitement, the expression of excitement. And I'll just put it that way. So I'm so glad that you shared that. The other thing that I think is very, very powerful, if I might just compliment it, the fact that you took the criticism and you kept moving forward, that is wonderful. In 2020, we are tissue paper thin. We get criticism and we unfriend you and we block you and we ain't gonna text you and we ain't gonna accept your calls. And when we see you, we're looking the other way and going the other way, or maybe we'll speak to you and acknowledge you and talk about you behind your back. To be able to take that criticism and move forward is that proving character, because Saul criticized David.
Yes, he did.
Saul looked at David and said, "You gonna what? To who? You gonna do what with what to who?" And David stood on faith. David stood on something that was different, and he was able to at least try the armor on. It's another message. He tried it on, and he said it's not proven. So he was able to take the criticism, and then he went back to what the Lord anointed and called him to do. That's powerful, Dad.
But you know what? Even with that, it was something that was interesting. Saul told David about what Goliath had experienced, and they were doing it at the same time. Saul told David that Saul was trained when he was younger to be a warrior. David is young, about to begin to be a warrior also in his youth. Goliath and David both started in their youth, but Saul forgot to recognize that Goliath started warfare at youth, and this was David's beginning of warfare also in their youth.
I hear you. I hear you toying with that one. That's certainly you're baiting me into a trap. That's what's happening. You're baiting me into a trap. Yes, absolutely. Despise not the days of your youth. See, there we go. I almost went out just that quickly. I just went out for a second. Oh, I got myself back in. You ain't gonna get me. Nope. But yes, Dad, I think that's an excellent point. He prides himself on doing this, but you ain't getting so I think we are at a good juncture. We got about 18 minutes, 17 minutes. I want to ask my fourth and maybe what could be the final question, but I got something else up my sleeve. David reached for what was proven to him. He went for the sling. He selected 5 stones, which indicates to me, I'm gonna turn this back, Dad. Now you like to bother me, I'm gonna bother you, which indicates to me that he didn't bring him with him. He had a sling with him, but he didn't have the stones, or he was able to acquire a sling. One or the other. I didn't get the specificity from reading the scripture, but what I do know is he didn't have the stones with him because he had to select them, right? So talk about a moment, and this I'm gonna say within 25 years of pastoring. Talk about a moment where you recognized and God showed you that what you have is enough.
Is or is not?
Is.
Now, he'll talk for a while, but you gave the key. David said, I come in the name of the Lord. That was loaded. Because even though he came with the slingshot, and he may not have the rocks, but he came in the name of the Lord. Saying what? Saying that he put his trust in the Lord, his faith in the Lord, that God would provide what he needed when he needed it. And because he came with that trust, your actions tell God that you trust him or you believe him. And David's action told God, I know you're gonna make me victorious because all I'm gonna do is take the slingshot. But I'm trusting that when I get to the battle, that you're gonna give me what I need. And so we come without books, we came without mentors, we came without a home, we came without the reassurance of a new job that would be here. And we came without even, I don't know if approval is the right word, but support from the people around us. But we came in the faith in God, knowing that God, if you put us here, you're going to provide what we need. Now, I could say a lot of things, but you know, like I say, you don't want.
Say one or
I
two.
don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm trying to say. You know,
However
but we pretty much rebuilt this ministry when we came because everything has stood still. So we didn't have guidance. We didn't have, at that time, we didn't have any mentors or strong friendship. We had, most our friends were ministers, elders, just like we were, you know. So we didn't have a strong base of pastors, if you will, to mentor us and to encourage us along the way. So we had to go just in the faith of God, believing, standing on the word of God that who he calls, he'll qualify us. Standing on the word that, Lord, you never left us up to this point, all the things that you have brought us through up to this point. That, Lord, if we pray and fast, you will teach us what we need and teach us, you know, how to go about and teach us, you know, your ways. I had to rely and dig down inside myself and just kind of lean on the stuff that I knew God had put in me from a girl. I always knew I was peculiar in the sense of my relationship with God, and I never really tapped into that, but I knew I was different in that way. And after, again, now that we can look back, the picture becomes clear and it starts to make a full circle and make sense. And knowing that the strong gift of discernment that the Lord had given me, the administrative gifts that the Lord had blessed me, the wisdom, even from the child, you know, kids used to tease me and say, you think you're a know-it-all, but God had given me a gift of wisdom. You know, I mean, wisdom is not something that somebody can give you. That's something from God. Knowing that, you know, I was teased for it then, but now I know, you know, the wisdom that God had given me was for a reason, for a particular reason. So just knowing these things, and digging down in to know that, just to trust God, that God, you gave me these and you gave me these things for this time. Yeah.
Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Now, wait a minute. Did you tell me that I don't belong? I just thought I'd ask that question.
Time flew. It seemed like 60 seconds, Mom.
I just thought about it. And see, that's where you get that from. See, you get that from his mom. But listen.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know, we had a Solomon experience. Solomon, what do you want? Lord, teach me how to go out and come in amongst your people. Don't never forget where you started from. The little things that mom and dad or your spiritual mother and dad has placed into you, the things that are godly, the things that your natural parents that are godly placed into you. Never forget your beginnings. My pastor said this. My pastor prophesied to the whole church about the preachers and the missionaries. We had 14 preachers and 22 missionaries. Wow. Pastor said, some of you are not paying any attention to me, but you're going to go to some places where they'll be starving for good preaching, good teaching, starving for music, and you're not going to be able to function. In other words, you won't survive. Some of you are going to places. If you don't get it now, you won't survive. And literally, that had happened to some of them. And I praise be to God that they called me the pastor flunky. They talked about me so bad, but God told me stay with my pastor. I didn't know that serving him as his driver before I knew about armor bearer or adjutant, I was doing the work.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that anointing, it was Elijah and Elisha, that mantle would fall upon me. Everything I had learned, I had to apply it when I came to Iowa. And then when I called the pastor, I had to apply it, And last but not least, in this session, when David was called to fight by God in an indirect way, this Philistine, David had prepared. He had one stone. He gathered one stone. One stone was for the Goliath that he saw. But then if you look at the record, give me Bishop Owens.
Look at the record. Check the record.
Check the record.
He picked up 4 more stones. You know why? Because if you know the historical heritage of the Philistine, there was 5 Philistine lords. One was to take Goliath out. But now since I'm out here, I might as well put 4 more stones to take out the 4 others. The 4 other kings wasn't out there, or the representation of the other 4 Philistine nations. But David knew, David felt in his spirit, God, since you called me, I'm not gonna just be prepared for one fight. I'm ready to take on the whole nation.
Mm-hmm.
David positioned himself to take on a whole nation. And if you look at his life, there was the last relative of Goliath. He was not even able to fight because they said he was too old. And he said, David, if you go and fight this last giant, and if you get hurt, the light of Israel will be snuffed out. And David wasn't allowed to fight the last one. But way back then, he was prepared to go all the way. What am I saying? When God has called you, be prepared to go all the way. I could not fathom 25 years down the road. Why? Because we were cutting new paths one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year at a time. So 25 years down the road, couldn't even see this.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I can say it's the Lord's doing, and it's marvelous in our eyes.
I'm gonna tell you, number one, Mom, clearly you stirred the preacher because he took off without even answering the question. Number 2, Dad, you're so spot on, and I know that word was inspired and breathed for someone who is watching this. So I absolutely hope that the audience is not only listening, but really searching themselves to let that word take seed in them. And then I will pivot really the final opportunity for remarks. I won't even put it as a question, but I'll give it to you, Mom. Actually, I'll give it to you, Dad, to start with. And Mom, I'll let you close us here with, we got just about 6 minutes. I think one of the unintentional themes that has kind of threaded itself through all of Chatting with the Clay season 1 and now season 2 has been actually bridging old and young. And I don't know if it's because you're my parents and I'm your child. I don't know why, but it seems when we look at old some of the previous episodes, there's still this theme threaded through all of them that's bridging unintentionally. And sometimes we've had segments that hit straight on the topic, and sometimes there have been segments unintentionally where that rises. But one thing I know can be helpful is if David didn't have encouragement
to move forward, we at least get to learn from David's story. And if we identify with him and don't feel like necessarily that there was either the mentorship or the support or the encouragement from peers or the generation ahead, we can learn from that. And I think sometimes we miss the opportunity to learn from that. So I wanted to give you all the opportunity to just share some of the things that inspire you from what you see in this next generation coming. I think it's easy to always focus on the criticisms and offer advice and counsel from the position of criticism, but you all know what it's like to be young and need someone to pour a seed. So what are some of the things that you see in this next generation that have you excited about where they can take the ministry going forward? So let's take a turn, and instead of giving them the advice of watch out for this, be careful for this, let's take the opportunity to sow into this next generation. What are some of the things that you've seen, Mom, that excite you about where this next generation can take ministry? Actually, I'm sorry, Dad, we'll start with you, and Mom, we'll book in with you.
Well, this is what I'll say, and I don't know how this will be received, but first of all, I thank God that I've never been interviewed by a vice president of a college before. And knowing that there are holy sanctified vice president of universities that love God.
Yes.
And for you that are viewing this live, I think I'm gonna let his mother talk more about that. But that's what I see. I see you in the future, and you look much better than you look right now. And the church is in good hands.
Thank you, Dad. I appreciate that, sir.
Well, I think the thing that we really can, that I'm excited about in this generation is that they are so fearless. And that's a quality that we need. They're not afraid to branch out. They're not afraid to learn. They're not afraid to experience. They're not afraid to embrace. They're not afraid of change. And I think those are a lot of things that have really kind of held the church back for years. I know you just said not the back, but I think this generation has that. They have that fearlessness that we need to forge new paths. And, and stubborn can be a bad or good word, but they have that stubbornness that it takes, because again, once you know that you really know that you said, nobody can change that, and I think, again, that's a quality that can be an asset. It can be an asset to the church, and it can be an asset to ministry. And just their hunger for knowledge. This generation is always wanting to know. And again, long as that's turned in the right direction, man, the sky is the limit. So I think, those things, and they're energetic, your generation is not interested in becoming old.
Right.
They're not looking and saying, well, one day, I'm gonna be, but they're not interested. They're steadily taking the age limits and shaving off time. Now there's the 60 is the new 30 and things like that. So they're always shaving off, so they're not interested. And as long as you have that type of energy, it's good. It's good for the church. It's good for life. It breathes life into anything that you're doing. So those are the things I would say that I could say that this generation does have, and it's great for the church.
And I'm gonna add this one, what is so powerful and that I have to catch up with, because I'm listening to the voice of the youth,
yeah,
and it's causing me to even though I get winded, it's causing me to grasp my second wind, because I see where you're going, and I want to be a part of that, to link up with the youth, so I don't want to see the youth run into a brick wall, and at the same time don't want to hold them back. So it's a great learning between the young and the old, because this is right now y'all's day, and we can't wait to let and hopefully I say this right. We cannot allow a whole generation to die off, and then when they're dead, say, now it's in y'all's hands.
Right.
That day is gone.
Mhm.
We have to work side by side. I have to understand the youth. The youth respect the older ones, and don't have to give credit, because God does that. But just respect that now I'm putting you up on my shoulder, and now you're on my shoulder. Go ahead and run with it. So that's what we have to do. And because we're in different times, different generations, and I didn't know about picking cotton, but I knew about feeding bulls, going in the chicken house and getting the eggs and feeding the pig. Most of you don't understand that type of what happened. So y'all are in a different day and time, and it's really the media, what I want to say, the social media and all these things. The technology is so vast, and you have to really hit it like this. And we really don't have that energy. I mean, I have the wind, but I have the legs to put you up on my shoulder and say, I'll hold you up, go with it.
Wow. Well, that's powerful. And I thought that was an appropriate way to end this segment, because not only are you all accomplished and successful in so many ways, from, the importance of all you do, pastoring a congregation and nurturing and growing that ministry at the local level, but also, you all have had the option and taken the opportunities to minister and have an impact on the national level. And I think that's amazing. Next Sunday is your 25th pastor and wife anniversary. This week of Chatting with the Clays was a prequel. We talked about getting your bearings. You all absolutely gave us a lot to think about, chew on. We're excited about. And again, we appreciate that not only you can have the impact you're having, but also that you've laid the foundation and you're willing to carry forward the generation that is to come. So thank you for your time. Always good and lovely to see you all. To our audience, be sure to subscribe, to follow this channel and be able to access the content. Be sure to like, and then also make sure that you share. So thank you for joining us. Next week, do not forget to tune in to a very, very, very special 25th pastor and wife anniversary service, honoring these two lovely people whom I get to call mom and dad. It's going to be an exciting time. You do not want to miss it. But until then, God bless you all. We'll see you soon. And I'll call you too as soon as we're done, like we always do. All right.
All right. God bless.
My brothers and sisters, I pray that this was a blessing unto you. First Lady Clay, would you like to say anything?
Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell. Leave a comment. God bless.